Hi, everybody. I'm going to be talking today about a global trend that we're seeing of breeding dairy cattle towards beef and to increase our profits that way. My name is Brad Gilchrist. I'm the beef marketing manager for CEMEX. And I guess today, before we get talking about which sires you should select and the reasons for it, I'll maybe just go along and talk about some of the reasons why we're seeing this global trend as we work to increase some people here, and feel free to reach out and ask any questions as we're going through as well. So the why are we seeing this trend? It is a trend that's shifting extremely fast and growing extremely fast. We're seeing an increased use of sex semen on our dairies to increase the genetic value and the heifers that they get out of it. And in doing so, we're seeing an increased number of females in that heifer pen and the female inventory in that heifer pen. So to manage our amount of money that it costs to raise these heifers, producers are looking at which heifers they truly want to keep in their milking herd and retain females out of. And they're leveraging Elevate and other genomic selections to maximize the gains in milking herd that they can get. So again, by taking all the tools that we have in our tool belt and making sure that we can lower our costs and increase our gains is really what we're trying to do with this dairy beef strategy. Now, when we talk about increasing profits from beef calves, to me it's really important to talk about raising the correct calf. Just by raising a beef calf out of a dairy isn't necessarily the right reason. Using cheap semen and genetics that aren't going to add value to the next producer isn't the right answer. I think if we look at it from a breeding perspective in the dairy industry, if we just had a very random approach to our genetic selections, we wouldn't be able to achieve the results. I think with CEMEX Works and some of the other solutions that CEMEX has, it really allows us to identify what females we have and the value that those females have. And then we're able to set goals and then make those breeding selections to achieve our goals. And I think when I look at a beef breeding strategy on dairy cattle, I think we need to take that same approach. We need to understand what the dairy industry offers, but also understand what its limitations are, and then use those limitations and the attributes that the industry has to increase the profitability in those calves coming out of the bottom end of the herd. So when I talk about a beef breeding strategy, it's really about selecting the right animal. And the right animal to use on your dairy is going to vary depending on the region that you're in within a country, or depending on which country you are around the world. And it's really all about what the buyer is looking for. So if you have a buyer that is looking to increase gains at all costs, or a buyer that's interested in increasing marbling and quality at all costs, those are going to be two very different animals that we're going to suggest to breed those dairies to. So I strongly encourage any dairy producer to really understand what the buyer is looking for. And specifically if we're in a market where we have buyers that are signed up in agreements to select and buy these calves, it's really crucial that those sires are meeting the needs of the end buyer. So one of the questions I often get asked is, there's so many different beef breeds. How do we know what beef breed we should be using or not using? And that's a really tough question to answer. And again, back to it depends on what our buyers are truly asking for. To me, most Angus programs right now is what's being used on the dairy herds, and a lot of that is the commercial demand for that breed and through the Certified Angus Beef program. The Angus cattle has seen a really global surgence of demand from the commercial sector all the way through, and that's really why everybody's running to Angus initially, in my opinion. Angus brings to the table a calving ease spectrum, but they also do a really good job of carcass quality and performance. But if that's not what the calf buyer is demanding, because he's not seeing enough efficiencies and gain in the feedlot, and maybe he's not getting that end carcass weight that he truly needs to be profitable, then that's not going to be the best breed for you, the breeder, to end up breeding your Holsteins or Jersey cows to. You know, maybe you have a Jersey herd that you need to get a little bit more growth and muscle shape out of. Maybe Limousin or Belgian Blue or some of the more terminal crosses are going to be a more benefit to that producer. So again, when I talk about all the different breeds that we have in the beef industry, they all bring a different perspective to the industry and different benefits. And then they also have deficiencies, as similar as what the Holsteins or Jerseys would have. So one thing, I guess, when I'm talking about breeds, I strongly encourage you to reach out to what the producers are looking for and really match up what those needs are and fulfill those needs. The same thing can be said when we talk about traits and what traits we want to use in the incredible Russell Gammon's on. Hello everybody on Facebook Live. That's great to see everybody coming on here. But back to the traits. So the other questions I get asked a lot are about traits. You know, and the beef traits, they can be hard to understand. They're a little different than the dairy industry. And I think one thing that we really need to truly understand is the calving ease and birth weight. So to me, when we look at calving ease and we look at birth weight, generally cattle that are extremely low birth will also be cattle that maybe don't perform quite as well in that feedlot once we put them on feed. True high performance cattle tend to be slightly higher birth individuals. So the trick is making sure that we've got cattle that are going to be low enough birth that we don't have any issues in the dairy industry, and yet high enough performance that we can maximize profits in the feedlot. So it's a really tricky balance to do, and every breed, again, is going to be a little bit different. We can't say the average Angus is the same as the average Limousin or the average Charolais or the average Belgian Blue. Each of them have their own comparison, and we have to be able to compare them within breeds. So again, we need to come up with that comfort level with our buyers that are buying these calves, making sure that they're comfortable with the breed and the quality of the cattle that they're getting, but at the same time ensuring that we're not going to have any issues within the dairy herds that we're breeding them from a calving ease standpoint. The same can be said when we look at some of the carcass traits. So as we increase marbling and ribeye area and overall carcass weights, there's also going to be some trade-offs. So generally what we see on really high ribeye cattle is they're going to be cattle that do tend to be higher performing individuals. Cattle that are higher marbling tend to be a little bit slower in their ability to mature. And I think when we look at marbling and ribeye specifically in terms of carcass traits, that's where we really need to look back at the dairy industry and understand what can they bring to the table from a beef perspective. And I think one thing that always shocked me in the data that we look at on Holstein cattle and Jersey specifically are that when we look at those cattle with the hide off, their marbling ability is extremely high. And when we look at some closeout data here, we can tend to see that there are 1 to 2% increase in percentage primes from those breeds compared to beef genetics. One of the biggest deficiencies, though, that the dairy industry has when we look at them from a beef perspective is their ability to increase the percentage of yield in terms of the amount of ribeye and the amount of muscle that they can produce, but also the shape of that ribeye. The shape can tend to be a little bit flatter, a little more elongated compared to that nice round shape that we would tend to see from Limousin, Belgian Blue, or maybe some more of the terminal type cross cattle. The other thing that we find on straight bred genetics coming from the dairy industry is that they do tend to take a little bit longer in the feedlot. So again, on a large study that we've looked at, there's about a 60-day window where we can shorten the number of days on feed when we use beef genetics compared to straight dairy genetics. So those are some of the biggest advantages. You know, I think when we look at the dairy industry, again, they bring a lot of great value to the beef industry from a quality standpoint in terms of the amount of marbling that they can put into these carcasses. But what we need to bring from the beef industry is the ability to lower that number of days on feed increase the percentage of yield and the amount of ribeye that we can get out of these cattle, and do it at a cheaper cost of feed than what it would be if we were just straight dairy genetics. So those are, to me, when we're looking at selecting the right sire, those are the most important things that we need to look at. We need to understand what our buyer's looking for, take what the advantages that we have from the dairy industry, and add them together to try to create a product that's going to be a little bit more valuable than straight bred dairy genetics. And if there's any questions on the beef on dairy thing, feel free to let me know, and I can try to address them here. And if there's not, again, reach out to myself or anybody on the CMEX team. We're all more than willing to help wherever we best can, and we can respond to you by email anytime, or reach out to us on the Facebook page too. So again, I'll maybe just give you a little bit more back. I'll go back to the start a little bit, and anybody that didn't join us right at the beginning. And again, the whole reason behind doing this is really to try to leverage and increase the demand increase the profitability from our dairy herds by increasing the value in these calves as we move forward. One question here is about Wagyu, and that's a great question. I didn't bring that up when we were talking about the different breeds. One thing, we did see a huge shift towards Wagyu initially, and I think Wagyu is a great breed. It brings a lot of value to the table. It's a little bit of a niche market, in my opinion, and it's that niche market is growing. It's been growing for the last number of years, and it's captivated a different market than what the traditional beef market would be. This meat quality is extremely high, and it's really, really high marbling. The thing with Wagyu, though, when we look at the breed itself, they tend to be slower performing cattle, or cattle that take a little bit longer to get to market. And so to me, when we're breeding Wagyu cattle to Holstein cattle or Jersey cattle or any other dairy breed, what we're seeing is we're breeding extremely high quality in terms of marbling to an industry or a genetic pool that's also extremely high marbling. Both breeds, whether we're looking at Wagyu, Holstein, Jersey, or any other dairy breed, they do all tend to be high marbling and lower gains. So for me, if we're going to look at it from a commercial standpoint, I really struggle to see the commercial aspects of Wagyu into dairy cattle, mainly just because of the amount of extra time that it's going to take to develop those cattle and get them to harvest weight. Where I do see Wagyu fitting, though, extremely well is on dairies or in producers that are looking at maybe more of a niche market. So if you live close to a large center of the population, a large city, or you're doing freezer beef and you've got access to lots of yard space and you've got access to lots of feed, I think the ability to bring that higher quality product certainly is going to be a value to yourself and to your consumers that are purchasing the product from you. So I think that's a great question, and I definitely think there's a place for it. To me, again, it's all about the consumer and where you can sell that product. And if you have a market to sell that product, I think it is a great solution. They do come out fairly small compared to some of the other breeds. Immunity Plus in dairy cows is, and any other data on the illnesses on farms. So that's a great question. Immunity Plus is certainly something that we're really proud of here at CMEX that we've developed on the dairy side of things, and we've done an excellent job. One nice thing about Elevate, we're able to identify now the females that are high immune response females. So when we breed beef to those females, those calves can go on to a feed yard and exhibit the same heritability traits that we're passing on the dairy side of things. So we are seeing an increased immune system from those calves that are coming from the Immunity Plus females. Now, that being said, we are also working on the Immunity Plus on the beef side. We are a little bit away from being able to launch that. We're currently working with the American Angus Association and the Canadian Angus Association to develop this and create the database that we need to make sure that we've got accuracy in this product. But I do think that this is something that's going to be a game changer in the future. And as we get this developed and launched in the market, I am really excited about some of the more profit that we can add to these cattle for the people that are feeding them in the feed yards moving forward. Breeds to maximize profit for heavy veal. So again, yeah, I think when we look at the veal market, it's about how fast we can get these cattle to gain, and how much muscle can we put on these cattle. So again, when I'm looking at answering some of these questions, to me it's all about what the next guy or the next producer is looking for. So if that next producer is looking for extremely fast gains and heavy muscles, then that's where we need to look at some of the more terminal breeds, like your Belgian Blues, British Blues, Piedmontese, Limousin, any of the blondes, any of the really heavy muscled breeds. Those cattle will tend to put on a little bit more muscle shape in a little bit faster time. Keeping in mind, all those breeds, though, that are extremely heavy muscled tend to be a little bit lower in terms of marbling. So that's where we need to really rely on the dairy industry to make sure that they're bringing to the table that high quality marbling product, and we can couple it with a breed that's going to bring to the table the heavier muscling approach. So another question here, from your experience, breed average birth weight or higher would be okay to use on dairy? I think, yeah, that's a great example, or a great question. In my personal opinion, if I was a dairy producer and looking at a beef bull to use, I wouldn't be afraid to use an Angus sire that is above breed average for sure on birth weight. Now I think when I look at this, and the question is breed average, so I think it really depends on what breed we're talking about. If we're talking about some of these higher performance breeds that tend to have a little bit more birth weight to them, I think we want to be a little cautious about getting up above breed average for birth weight. But when we're looking at a breed like Angus or Wagyu or any of those breeds that tend to be lower birth, I think we can get away with pushing that envelope and getting a little bit more performance out of these cattle by using genetics that are above breed average. We still get paid by the pound no matter where we are in the world, whether we're here in North America, Europe, or anywhere. So it's really important that we do pay attention to that overall weight. I think it's also really important that we do pay attention to quality. But at the end of the day, calf buyers that are coming around and looking at a 60-pound calf, sometimes that's not overly attractive either. So maintaining above breed average on birth weight and some of the really low birth breeds, I think, in my opinion, is more than satisfactory. And you shouldn't have any issues in doing that either from a calving ease perspective. Which beef breed would be best for brown Swiss cow for a daily gain? Yeah, so again, I think when we look at brown Swiss, we need to analyze what that breed can bring to the table. And I think when I look at brown Swiss compared to Holsteins or Jerseys, they probably have a little bit more robust look to them. They have a little bit stronger bone structure. They've got probably a little bit more thickness throughout when we look at them from a beef standpoint. Again, they're going to bring some higher marbling to the table still than what most beef breeds will, but I think you will get a little bit more growth and rigidness out of those cattle rather than the dairy breed. So I think we can look at it's going to depend on what your buyer is looking for. If color pattern matters, we definitely need to take that into perspective. If we want pooled genetics or again, cattle that just gain extremely fast, you can probably look towards more of those terminal type breeds in Limousin or Belgian Blue, British Blue, Blonde, that kind of stuff. So yeah, every breed that we're looking at from a dairy perspective, we really just need to look at the benefits that they can bring to the table, what our calf buyers are looking for, and then use the best beef breed to match the two of them up. Is CMEX working on helping to document dairy beef animals so that farmers can demand price? Absolutely. So I think one of our big objectives is to try to integrate the supply chains a little bit. And depending on the markets that we're in, we do have some supply chains that are set up now where the dairy is using a specific set of bulls that the calf buyer wants, and then those bulls then get used in the program. The calf buyer comes around, picks up the calves, and takes them on through the whole supply chain right through to the end, and marketing them to the consumer. So again, the specifics of each one of them are slightly different. Everybody's got, depending on where they are in the world, access to feed, land, time, what the consumer is demanding in those markets, how they're paid in those markets. The logistics of it is going to be a little bit different, and the genetics that we need to use in each supply chain is going to be slightly different, depending on that. But again, I'm going to go back to it's all about what our consumers' needs are. And as long as we can meet and exceed our consumers' needs, then we're doing the right thing from a genetics point of view. If we're trying to match, or we're trying to change our consumers' perspective for the genetics that we're using, then I think we're doing this backwards. And to me, again, that's where we need to leverage, elevate, and our genomic selection tools that we have. Make sure that we can maximize profits out of the genetics on the dairy side of things, and then maximize the profitability from the bottom end cattle on the beef side of things, matching up with what our consumers are looking for. So with that, I think I will end it there. If there is any more questions, feel free to let us know through Facebook or email, and we will be sure to get back to you. Hopefully everybody's staying safe in this interesting times, and we look forward to working with you on into the future. Take care, everybody, and everybody stay safe.